The letter arrived on a Tuesday, smeared with mud and smelling faintly of diesel, as if it had been carried across the country in the bed of a pickup truck. It promised a job, a fresh start, and a chance to escape the suffocating weight of my past. I was 34, broke, and running out of reasons to keep fighting until those words, scrawled in elegant cursive, offered me a lifeline. My name is Eli Carter, and I'd spent the last decade scraping by in Chicago, where dreams go to drown in concrete and regret. The city had chewed me up me family's rejection after I came out. The endless string of dead-end jobs. The lover who left when my bank account hit zero. So when the letter from a man named Julian Hawthorne invited me to work his sprawling farm in rural Montana, I didn't ask questions. I packed my duffel bag, sold my last guitar for gas money, and drove 200 miles to a place I'd never seen, chasing a promise I barely believed. The Hawthorne estate was nothing like I'd imagined. No quaint farmhouse or weathered barn. This was a mansion carved into the foothills, all glass and stone, overlooking fields that stretched endless under a sky too big for city eyes. I stood at the iron gates, my boots sinking into the gravel, feeling like an imposter. Julian emerged from the house, his silhouette sharp against the morning sun. Early 40s, tall, with dark hair flecked with gray and eyes that seemed to see through me. He wore a tailored coat over jeans, a strange mix of wealth and earth, and his handshake was firm but lingered a moment too long. "You're Eli?" he said, not asking. His voice was low, steady, like he was used to being heard. "Welcome to Blackthorn." I nodded, unsure what to say. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to work, to bury my hands in dirt and forget the ache in my chest. But Julian's gaze held something I couldn't place: curiosity, maybe, or something deeper. It unsettled me, like a stone skipping across still water. The first week was brutal. The farm was massive, 500 acres of wheat, corn, and pasture, and I was one of only 3 hands hired to manage it. The other 2, Maria and Tom, were locals, tough as leather and skeptical of the city boy who didn't know a combine from a tractor. I learned fast, though, driven by desperation and the need to prove I wasn't just some drifter. Julian was always there, watching from a distance, sometimes joining us in the fields. He'd roll up his sleeves, his hands surprisingly calloused for a man who owned half the county. He asked questions about the soil, the weather, my methods, but I caught him staring when he thought I wasn't looking. One evening, after a 14-hour day, I found him waiting by the barn. The sun was sinking, painting the fields gold, and he held 2 beers, condensation dripping down the bottles. "You're good at this," he said, handing me one. "Better than I expected." I shrugged, taking a sip. "Dirt's honest. Doesn't care who you are." He laughed, a sound that felt rare, like it had been locked away for years. "Most people don't see it that way. They see land, money, power." "And you?" I asked, bolder than I meant to be. His eyes met mine, sharp and searching. "I see something worth saving." That night, I lay in the bunkhouse, staring at the ceiling, his words looping in my mind. I'd come here to escape, to disappear into work. But Julian Hawthorne was pulling me into something I wasn't ready for. I didn't trust him. Men like him didn't look at men like me unless they wanted something. But what did he want? The farm was thriving, his wealth undeniable. So why was he out here, handing me beers and watching me like I was the answer to a question he hadn't asked? By the end of the month, I'd settled into a rhythm. Wake at dawn, work until my muscles screamed, eat with Maria and Tom, who were warming to me despite their grumbling. Julian started joining us more often, Not just observing, but working alongside us hauling hay, repairing fences, driving the old pickup like he'd been born to it. He didn't act like a millionaire. He listened, laughed at Tom's bad jokes, and asked about my life in Chicago without pushing too hard. But there was always that look, that quiet intensity, like he was waiting for me to crack open and spill my secrets. One afternoon, we were alone in the equipment shed, sorting tools. Sweat stung my eyes, and my shirt clung to my back. Julian handed me a wrench, his fingers brushing mine, and I froze. It wasn't an accident. His gaze locked onto mine, unapologetic, and for a moment, the air felt too heavy to breathe. "You don't talk much about yourself," he said, stepping closer. "Why's that?" I stepped back, my heart thudding. "Nothing worth talking about." "I doubt that." His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, like he was daring me to lie. I turned away, busying myself with the tools. I'd spent years building walls around my heart, and I wasn't about to let some rich man with a farm and a smile tear them down. But as I drove back to the bunkhouse that night, his face lingered in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was already in deeper than I'd planned. The days blurred into weeks, each one heavy with labor and something unspoken growing between me and Julian. The Montana sky seemed to press down on me, vast and unyielding, mirroring the weight of his glances. I tried to focus on the work, planting, harvesting, fixing what broke, but his presence was a current pulling me off course. One morning, as I was checking the irrigation lines, Julian appeared with a thermos of coffee. He poured me a cup without asking, the steam curling between us in the chilly dawn. "You're avoiding me," he said, not accusing, just stating a fact. I took the cup, my fingers brushing his, and ignored the jolt it sent through me. "Got work to do," I muttered, turning back to the pipes. "Work's not going anywhere." He leaned against a fence post, watching me. "But you might." I stopped, my hands stilling on the wrench. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out at the fields, his jaw tight. "This place, it's not just land to me. It's where I came from, where I'm trying to come back to." I didn't know what to say. His words felt like a confession, but I wasn't ready to hear it. I'd learned the hard way that opening up left you vulnerable, and vulnerability was a luxury I couldn't afford. So I shrugged and went back to work, pretending I didn't feel his eyes on me as he walked away. That night, Maria invited me to the local bar, a dive called Rusty's with neon signs and sticky floors. Tom was already there, nursing a beer, and Julian showed up an hour later, surprising us all. He didn't belong in a place like this, with his tailored coat and city polish, but he slid into the booth like he'd been coming here for years. We talked about the farm, the weather, anything but the tension that hummed between us. Then a slow song came on, and Maria dragged Tom to the dance floor, leaving me and Julian alone. "You dance?" he asked, his voice low over the music. I laughed, sharp and nervous. "Not my thing." He leaned closer, his elbow brushing mine. "Maybe you just haven't found the right partner." My pulse spiked, and I looked away, focusing on the label of my beer bottle. He was too close, too real, and I didn't know how to handle it. I'd spent years keeping people at arm's length, but Julian was slipping through the cracks, and it scared me more than I wanted to admit. The next day, a storm rolled in, dark clouds swallowing the sun. We scrambled to secure the equipment and cover the hay, working through sheets of rain. Julian was there, soaked to the bone, his hair plastered to his forehead as he helped me tie down tarps. When a gust of wind nearly knocked me off the ladder, his hand shot out, steadying me. For a moment, we were inches apart, rain dripping from his face to mine, and I saw something raw in his eyes, fear. Not for the storm, but for me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the wind. I nodded, pulling away, but my heart was racing, and not from the fall. That night, as the storm raged outside, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing his face, his hand on my arm, the way he looked at me like I was more than a hired hand. I told myself it was nothing, that I was reading too much into it. But deep down, I knew better. The weeks that followed were a dance of avoidance and inevitability. I threw myself into the work, hoping exhaustion would drown out the questions in my head. But Julian was relentless, not pushy, but present, always finding ways to be near me. He'd bring coffee, ask my opinion on the crop rotation, linger after the others left. And every time, I felt the walls I'd built start to crumble. One evening, as we were repairing a fence in the far pasture, he broke the silence. "Why'd you come here, Eli? Really?" I hammered a nail into the post. Harder than necessary. "Needed a job. You offered one." "That's not the whole story." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. "You're running from something. Or someone." I froze, the hammer heavy in my hand. He was too close to the truth, and I hated how exposed I felt. "Doesn't matter," I said, my voice rough. "I'm here now." "Yeah," he said softly. "You are." That night, I dreamed of Chicago, of the night my father called me a mistake and my mother didn't say a word. I woke up sweating, the bunkhouse dark and quiet, and for the first time in years, I wanted to tell someone the truth. Not just anyone, Julian, but wanting something didn't make it safe. The truth was a splinter under my skin, sharp and impossible to ignore. I'd run to Montana to escape my past, but Julian was digging it up, piece by piece, with every look, every question. And the worst part, I was starting to want him to. Fall was settling in, the fields turning gold and the air sharp with the promise of winter. The work slowed, giving me too much time to think. Julian invited me to the main house one evening, saying he needed help with some paperwork. I knew it was an excuse, but I went anyway, drawn by something I couldn't name. The house was warm, all polished wood and soft light, a stark contrast to the bunkhouse's bare walls. Julian led me to his study, a room lined with books and a fireplace crackling in the corner. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing me one. "To surviving the season," he said, raising his glass. I clinked mine against his, the amber liquid catching the firelight. "To surviving," I echoed, but my voice was hollow. Survival was all I'd been doing for years, and I was tired of it. We sat by the fire, the paperwork forgotten. He asked about Chicago again, gently, like he was coaxing a wounded animal. I told him pieces safe once, about the city's noise, the way the wind cut through you on the lakefront. But then he asked about my family, and the words stuck in my throat. "They didn't take it well?" I said finally, staring into the flames. "Me being me." He didn't push, just nodded, his eyes soft. "Mine either," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. I looked at him, surprised. "You?" He smiled, bitter and small. "Why do you think I'm out here? Miles from anyone. Easier to hide when you own the land." The air shifted, heavy with shared secrets. I wanted to ask more, to know his story, but fear held me back. Instead, I sipped my whiskey, letting the burn ground me. We talked late into the night, about the farm, about books, about nothing and everything. When I left, the cold air hit me like a slap. But inside, I felt warmer than I had in years. The next day, Julian found me in the barn, checking the tractor's engine. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me work. "You're good with your hands," he said, and there was something in his tone that made my skin heat. "Comes with the job," I said, keeping my eyes on the engine. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, faint under the scent of hay and oil. "Not just the job, Eli. You've got a way of fixing things." I straightened, wiping my hands on a rag, my heart pounding. "What's that supposed to mean?" He held my gaze, unflinching. "You make things better. This place. The people here. Me." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever said anything like that to me. Not in a way that felt real. I wanted to believe him, but doubt was a reflex, hardwired from years of betrayal. I turned back to the tractor, muttering something about needing to finish up. But Julian didn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, he found ways to pull me closer a shared lunch in the fields, a late-night walk to check the livestock, quiet moments where words felt unnecessary. Each one chipped away at my defenses, and I hated how much I craved them. I'd spent so long protecting myself. But Julian was patient, persistent, like water wearing down stone. One night, a calf got stuck in the mud near the creek. It was late, the temperature dropping fast, and Julian and I worked together to free it, our breath clouding in the moonlight. When the calf finally stumbled free, we were soaked and shivering. But Julian laughed, his face lit with relief. Without thinking, I reached out, brushing mud from his cheek. His laughter stopped, and for a moment, we just stood there, his skin warm under my fingers. "Eli," he said, his voice rough, and I saw the want, the fear, the same mess of feelings I was drowning in. I pulled back, my chest tight. "We should get back," I said, turning away before I could do something stupid. That night, I lay awake, cursing myself. I'd come here to start over, not to fall for a man who could break me in ways I hadn't even imagined. But Julian wasn't just a man. He was a storm, and I was caught in it, no matter how hard I tried to run. The line between want and need was blurring, and I was losing my grip on both. Julian was everywhere, his voice in my head, his touch lingering in my memory, his presence a constant pull I couldn't escape. I told myself to keep my distance, to focus on the work, but my heart wasn't listening. Winter was creeping closer, the fields bare and the air sharp enough to cut. The farm slowed, but Julian found new reasons to keep me close, planning for spring, repairing the greenhouse, even asking me to help him sort through old family photos in the house. Each moment felt like a test, and I was failing. One afternoon, we were in the attic, surrounded by dusty boxes and faded memories. Julian pulled out a photo of a young boy, maybe 10, standing in the same fields I worked now. "That's me," he said, his voice soft, before everything changed. I took the photo, studying his younger self, same sharp jaw, same intense eyes. "What changed?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. He sat back, his shoulders heavy. "My father built this place, but he didn't want me to stay. Said I didn't fit the life he'd planned. So I left New York, London, anywhere but here. Made my fortune, but it didn't fix what was broken." I wanted to ask what was broken, but the weight in his voice stopped me. Instead, I handed the photo back, our fingers brushing. "You're here now?" I said, echoing his words from weeks ago. He looked at me, his eyes searching. "Because of you." My breath caught, and I stood, needing air, needing space. But Julian followed, his presence steady and unrelenting. "Eli, stop running," he said, his voice low but firm. You feel it too. I know you do. I turned, my back against a beam, my heart hammering. Feel what? You don't know me. Julian. I know enough, he said, stepping closer. I know you're scared. I know you're fighting this. But I'm not going anywhere. I wanted to push him away, to tell him he was wrong. But the truth was clawing its way out. I was tired of fighting, tired of hiding. So I kissed him hard, desperate, like I was drowning and he was air. He kissed me back, his hands gripping my shirt. And for a moment, the world was just us, raw and real and terrifying. We pulled apart, breathless, and I saw the same fear in his eyes that I felt in my chest. This can't happen, I said, my voice shaking. You're my boss. You're you. And you're you, he said, his hand still on my arm. That's enough for me. I left the attic, my mind a mess of want and warning. The next few days, I avoided him, throwing myself into work. But the memory of that kiss burned through me. Maria noticed, her sharp eyes catching my distraction. You okay, city boy? She asked one morning, her tone half teasing, half concerned. Fine, I lied. But she didn't push. Julian didn't push either. But he didn't back off. He gave me space. But his presence was still there. In every glance. Every quiet moment. And then, one night, he showed up at the bunkhouse. His coat dusted with snow. We need to talk, he said, his voice steady but urgent. I let him in, my heart racing. He stood by the door, his hands in his pockets, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. I'm not good at this, he said. I've spent years keeping people out. But you're different. Eli, you make me want to try. I wanted to believe him, to let myself fall. But fear was a chain around my heart. What happens when you change your mind? I asked. When you realize I'm not worth it. He stepped closer, his eyes fierce. You're worth everything. Those words broke something in me. And I kissed him again. Slower this time, like I was memorizing him. But even as I let myself feel, doubt lingered. I'd been hurt before. And Julian, with his wealth and his secrets, could hurt me worse than anyone. The kiss changed everything. And nothing. I was still Eli Carter, the broken man who'd fled Chicago. And Julian was still the millionaire who owned the land I worked. But now, there was no going back. We'd crossed a line, and the world felt sharper, brighter, more dangerous. We kept it quiet, stealing moments when no one was looking, a brush of hands in the barn, a glance across the fields. But secrecy was a weight, and I felt it every time Maria or Tom looked at me too long, like they knew something was different. Julian didn't seem to care. He was bolder, more open, inviting me to the house for dinners that felt like dates, talking about the future like it was something we could share. One night, over a bottle of wine, he told me about his life before Montana, the corporate world, the deals, the loneliness that came with power. I thought money would fix me, he said, staring into his glass. But it just made the empty spaces louder. I reached for his hand, my thumb tracing his knuckles. And now, he said, looking at me, I'm starting to hear something else. My heart ached with how much I wanted to believe him. But doubt was a shadow, always there. I'd been burned before by family, by lovers, by my own naive hope. Julian was different, but he was also a risk, and I wasn't sure I could survive another fall. Then came the letter. It was slipped under the bunkhouse door. No stamp, no return address, just my name in sharp, angry handwriting. Inside was a single sentence: leave Blackthorn, or everyone will know what you are. My blood ran cold. I'd faced hate before, but this was personal, targeted, like someone had been watching me. I showed it to Julian the next morning, my hand shaking. His face darkened as he read it, his jaw tight. "This is my land," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "No one threatens you here." But the threat lingered, a poison in the air. I started noticing things: tire tracks near the bunkhouse that didn't belong, a shadow moving in the trees at dusk. Julian hired extra security, but it didn't ease the knot in my chest. Someone knew about us, and they wanted me gone. One night, as we sat by the fire, Julian took my hand, his grip firm. "You're not leaving," he said, like he could will it into truth. "Not because of this." "I don't want to run," I said, my voice breaking. "But what if staying hurts you? Your reputation, your business." "I don't care about that," he interrupted, his eyes fierce. "I care about you." I wanted to believe him, but fear was louder. The next day, I found another note. This one pinned to the barn door: "Faggot doesn't belong here." The word hit like a fist, dragging me back to every insult, every rejection. I tore it down before anyone else could see, but the damage was done. Julian found me later, sitting on the porch, staring at nothing. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me, his shoulder brushing mine. "We'll figure this out," he said finally. "Together." I nodded, but inside, I was unraveling. I'd come to Blackthorn to escape my past, but it had followed me, and now it was threatening the one thing I'd started to believe in. Julian was worth fighting for, but I didn't know if I was strong enough to win. The weeks that followed were tense. The farm a battlefield of whispers and suspicion. Maria and Tom started asking questions, their loyalty to Julian warring with their unease about me. I kept working, kept my head down, but every creak of the bunkhouse, every stranger on the road, felt like a threat. And through it all, Julian was there, steady and unwavering, but I could see the strain in his eyes, the cost of standing by me. One night, as snow began to fall, he pulled me into the greenhouse, the air warm and thick with the scent of earth. "I'm not letting you go," he said, his voice raw. "Not now. Not ever." I kissed him, desperate and afraid, clinging to the hope that he was right. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Someone wanted me gone, and they weren't going to stop. Fear was a shadow that clung to me, darker with each passing day. The notes kept coming, each one sharper, uglier, a blade slicing at the fragile thing growing between me and Julian. But he refused to let them tear us apart, and I clung to his stubbornness. Even his doubt gnawed at me. Winter settled over Blackthorn, blanketing the fields in snow and turning the world quiet. Deceptive. The work was lighter, now checking livestock, repairing equipment, but the tension was heavier than ever. Maria and Tom were distant, their glances laced with suspicion. I didn't know if they'd seen the notes or just sensed the shift in me, but the bunkhouse felt colder, lonelier, despite Julian's warmth. One morning, I found a photo taped to my truck's windshield, a grainy shot of me and Julian in the greenhouse, his hand on my face, our lips close. Scrawled across it in red marker, "You don't belong." My stomach churned. Someone had been watching us, close enough to capture that moment, and the violation cut deeper than the words. I showed Julian, expecting anger, but his face went pale, his hands trembling as he crumpled the photo. "This ends now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. He called a meeting with the farmhands, his lawyer, and the security team, laying out the threats in stark detail. Maria's eyes widened, and Tom shifted uncomfortably, but neither admitted to knowing anything. "I don't care who it is," Julian said, his gaze sweeping the room. If you're behind this, you're done. And if you're not, you protect this place and Eli like it's your own. The room was silent, the weight of his words sinking in. I wanted to feel safe, but the photo burned in my mind. A reminder that someone hated me enough to stalk us. That night, Julian insisted I stay in the main house. You're not alone in this, he said, pulling me close. I won't let you be. I wanted to argue, to keep my distance, but his arms were the only place that felt safe. We lay together in his bed, the fire casting shadows on the walls. And for the first time, I told him everything: my father's rejection, my mother's silence, the lover who'd left when I had nothing left to give. He listened, his hand steady on mine. And when I finished, he kissed my forehead, soft and sure. You're not nothing, he whispered. You're everything to me. The words broke me open, and I let myself believe them, if only for that night. But the next morning, reality crashed back. A fire broke out in the barn, small but deliberate, the smell of gasoline lingering in the charred wood. The security team found a lighter nearby, engraved with initials I didn't recognize. Julian was furious, doubling the patrols. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear I felt. We need to find who's doing this, he said, pacing the study, before it gets worse. I nodded, but inside, I was spiraling. The threats weren't just about me anymore, they were about Julian, about the life he'd built. I started to wonder if staying was selfish, if my presence was a curse on him. But every time I tried to pull away, he held on tighter, his belief in us stronger than my doubt. Then came the breakthrough. Maria caught a stranger lurking near the property line, a man in his 50s with a camera and a notebook. She chased him off, but not before snapping a photo of his license plate. Julian's lawyer traced it to a private investigator hired by an anonymous client. Someone with money, the lawyer said, and a grudge. Julian's face hardened. My family, he said, almost to himself. They've never forgiven me for coming back here, for being me. I stared at him, the pieces falling into place. His father's rejection, his years away, the wealth he'd built to prove himself, it all pointed to a family that would rather destroy him than accept him. And I was the perfect target to hurt him most. We'll fight this, Julian said, taking my hand. Together. I wanted to believe we could, but the weight of his family's power was crushing. They weren't just a threat, they were a machine. And I was a nobody caught in its gears. But as I looked at Julian, his eyes fierce with determination, I knew I couldn't walk away. Not yet. The truth about Julian's family was a blade, cutting through the fragile hope we'd built. They weren't just disapproving, they were ruthless, willing to burn down everything Julian loved to keep him in line. And I was the spark they wanted to snuff out. We spent days digging, Julian's lawyer working overtime to trace the investigator's client. Every lead pointed back to Julian's father, a man who'd built an empire and expected his son to inherit it. Not a farm and a life he didn't approve of. The notes, the fire, the photo, they were warnings. Not just to me, but to Julian: conform or lose everything. I wanted to run, to spare Julian the fallout. But he wouldn't hear it. They don't get to decide my life, he said one night, his voice fierce as we sat in the study. Not anymore. I admired his fire, but fear was louder. I'd seen what hate could do, how it could strip you bare and leave you with nothing. I didn't want that for Julian, not when he'd fought so hard to build this life. But every time I tried to say it, he'd pull me close, his touch a reminder that I wasn't alone. Then the investigator struck again. This time, it was a package, delivered to the main house with no return address. Inside was a stack of photos, Julian and me. Every stolen moment, every glance, Every touch. And a letter. End it. Or we'll end you. Julian's hands shook as he read it. But he didn't crumple it. He handed it to his lawyer, his face a mask of resolve. They think they can scare me, he said. They're wrong. But they weren't just trying to scare him, they were trying to destroy him. The next day, a local news outlet published a story, Millionaire Farmer's Secret Life Exposed. It was vague, full of insinuations about Julian's questionable relationships. But the message was clear. His family was playing dirty, using their influence to turn the town against him. The fallout was immediate. Suppliers canceled contracts. Neighbors stopped coming by. And Maria and Tom grew quieter. Their loyalty tested. I felt like a poison, tainting everything I touched. Maybe I should go, I told Julian one night, my voice breaking. This is because of me. No, he said, grabbing my shoulders. This is because of them. And I'm not letting them win. He fought back, hiring a PR firm to counter the story, reaching out to allies in the community. But the damage was done, and I saw it in the lines on his face, the way he carried the weight of it all. I wanted to fix it, to protect him the way he'd protected me, but I didn't know how. Then came the final blow. Julian's father arrived at Blackthorn, unannounced, his sleek black car cutting through the snow like a blade. He was older than I'd imagined, his face carved with the same sharp features as Julian's, but colder, harder. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge me, just demanded to speak to his son alone. I waited outside, the cold biting through my jacket, my heart pounding. When Julian emerged, his face was pale, his eyes haunted. He wants me to sell the farm, he said, his voice flat. Says it's the only way to save my reputation. And you? I asked, dreading the answer. He looked at me, his eyes fierce. I told him to go to hell. I laughed, despite everything, and he pulled me into his arms, holding me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. But the victory was fleeting. That night, the barn was set on fire again, this time burning half the structure before we could stop it. The police found no evidence, no leads, but I knew who was behind it. We can't keep doing this, I said, my voice raw as we stood in the ashes. They'll destroy you. Then let them try, Julian said, his hand finding mine. You're worth more than this farm. Eli, you're worth everything. I wanted to believe him, but the cost was mounting, and I wasn't sure how much more we could take. The fight wasn't just about us, Anna Maria, it was about surviving a world that didn't want us to exist. The ashes of the barn were a reminder that love, no matter how fierce, couldn't shield us from hate. Julian stood by me, unwavering, but the cost was written in the lines on his face, the strain in his voice. I wanted to protect him, to give him the peace he'd given me. But the world was closing in, and I didn't know how to stop it. Julian's father didn't stop. The threats escalated, legal letters demanding he sell the farm, whispers in town about his scandalous lifestyle, even a lawsuit claiming mismanagement of family assets. Each blow was calculated, designed to break him, and I was the leverage they used. I felt like a wound in his life, bleeding him dry, and the guilt was suffocating. One night, as we sat in the ruins of the barn, snow falling softly around us, I broke. I can't do this to you, I said, my voice cracking. I'm not worth this. Julian, your family, your life, theory tearing it apart because of me. He grabbed my face, his hands cold but steady. Don't you dare say that, he said, his eyes burning. You're the only thing that makes this worth fighting for. I kissed him, desperate and raw, pouring everything I couldn't say into that moment. But even as I clung to him, I knew we couldn't keep running from the truth. His family wouldn't stop. and the town was turning against us. Maria and Tom stayed loyal, but I saw the doubt in their eyes, the fear of what this fight might cost them. Then came the turning point. Julian's lawyer found evidence, a paper trail linking the investigator to his father's company. Proof of the arson, the threats, everything. It wasn't enough to end the fight, but it was enough to fight back. Julian called a town meeting, standing in the community hall with me by his side, his voice steady as he laid out the truth. "This is my home," he said, his hand finding mine in front of everyone. "And Eli is my home. If you can't accept that, you're the ones who don't belong here." The room was silent. Then slowly, people started to clap. Maria first, then Tom, then others, until the sound filled the hall. Not everyone joined in, but it was enough. For the first time, I felt like we weren't alone. Julian's father didn't back down, but the tide was turning. The lawsuit was dropped. The threats slowed, and the town began to heal. Piece by piece, we rebuilt the barn, not just with wood and nails, but with something stronger: trust, love, the kind of hope that grows from shared struggle. Maria and Tom stood by us, their loyalty a quiet strength, and the farm became a symbol of something bigger than us. One spring morning, as the fields bloomed green and the sky stretched endless above us, Julian took me to the place where we'd first met, by the iron gates of Blackthorn. He knelt in the dirt, not with a ring, but with a promise. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, his voice steady, "but I know I want you in it. Marry me, Eli." I laughed, tears in my eyes, and pulled him to his feet. "Yes," I said, kissing him under that wide Montana sky. "Yes." We didn't win every battle. Some wounds lingered. Julian's family never reconciled, and the town wasn't fully ours. But we had each other, and that was enough. Blackthorn wasn't just a farm. Anna Maria, it was a home, built on love that refused to break. And as we stood together, hands entwined, I knew that no matter what came next, we'd face it side by side, rooted in the soil we'd fought for.